there are times where I'm like, oh my God, he is so famous still. I actually forget that when we're just like eating Cheetos on the couch watching Netflix, and then we go outside and it's like, I'm kind of scared, we should probably go back inside. Like, so a lot of aunties coming up to you.
Not the aunties. So, Sabrina, now I feel terrible going into this podcast interview because you told me off air as we were talking that you're on vacation right now. You're in Cabo, and I'm like, why is this woman talking to me right now? But this just proves how great and wonderful and professional that you are, because I won't lie, had the roles been reversed, I've been like, yeah, y'all, I don't know about this interview.
I appreciate you saying that. I think, we really wanted to do this and I'm excited to do it. And it was just about finding that time. And when you're on holiday, you got time. So I don't mind at all. This is perfect.
This is true. And so you are one of the few pairs in, I should say, Jemele Hill is Unbothered history I've been able to complete. So I had Idris on, I think he started this season maybe, because Beast was out and we did an interview, and now I have you. And so I have I got the Infinity Stones now. So it's all good.
I love that. I'm going to tell him that you referred to us as the Infinity Stones. That made my day right there. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm a big Marvel head, so I'm glad you got that corny joke. But before we get started into your career, the company that you two have built, all the work that you guys are doing as global ambassadors, which is really, really outstanding, I'm going to ask you a question I ask every guest that appears on Jemele Hill is Unbothered, and that is, when did you become unbothered?
When did I become unbothered? You start with the tough ones, eh?
Yeah.
You know what? I've actually gone through phases of being unbothered. I felt at the cusp of like going into real adulthood, like I was about 25. I graduated university. There was a moment where I felt unbothered. There was a moment where I was very much confident in who I was, knew my life trajectory, found my place somewhat in the world. Immigrant parents, was going to law school, felt like I fulfilled their dream at least. And then it kind of went away when I met Idris, because I sort of had this beautiful tornado come in and shake everything up. I moved to London, started working in a field that I didn't think I would be working in. I started doing PR, and everything just kind of changed. And I went through a period of finding that feeling again, and finding that for me, it was grounded in a sort of self-assurance. And I found that again recently, and I would say kind of like when the world was coming back together after the pandemic, I want to say like maybe almost a year ago now, right? Where I'd gone on a couple journeys and found myself in this philanthropic world that felt like this is what I should be doing. And I would say now I can say again that I feel unbothered.
Now,
Still bothered about some things though.
But it's okay to be bothered. It doesn't mean that you don't care if you're unbothered, but really that's just my way of asking people, when did you start feeling comfortable in your own skin?
Mm.
Yeah. Now I have heard similar stories from many children of immigrants. It's like lawyer, doctor. Those seem to be the two professions that most, especially obviously
or engineer. Don't
or
forget
engineer,
about
right?
engineer. Yeah.
Correct. That's a good one. Especially the children of African immigrants. So how did you let your parents know that you were not going to pursue that law career?
I mean, funny enough, I kind of didn't. And I think my mom still thinks I am, which is a little bit funny. But I deferred from law school after I did the LSAT, and then I was going to go to UBC, which I'm so thankful that was going to be like, and I don't want to say like law school is amazing. I'm not saying anything negative to the craft for so many people who love it and enjoy it on the daily. But I just didn't want to. I felt it was too early in my life to kind of pigeonhole myself in something before I saw the rest of the world, learned more, just went through a further journey of discovery. And it's funny because if you ask my mom the time, she's like, that's all you did. You took like 2 semesters abroad. You like traveled every semester you had off. But I didn't feel satisfied. I had like this enormous appetite to see more. And, when I was moving to London and I started working in an office, it kind of cemented this idea for me that this isn't really me. This isn't, and no shade to the 9 to 5, but like it wasn't me. I was so envious of watching Idris be like, babe, I'll be right back. I gotta go, I'm gonna travel, and like having this very free entrepreneurial spirit and you know, a work sense when he wasn't filming that was very much dictated by his time and his feelings, and I was like, oh, I want that. I want that right now. And you know, I think a lot of us kind of crave that and want that. And I thought, all right, I'm going to take a risk and pursue it, and maybe see if I have an entrepreneurial sense, and see how I can survive in a world outside of the security and comfort of an office and a day job. And it's a scary place to be, but I feel like it was worth every second that it was scary, because it paid off in the end, in the sense that I feel so much more satisfied that I have seen and felt and discovered the world in the way that I wanted to.
So you grew up in Canada, correct?
I did. I was born East Coast Canada, Montreal. Shout out to my Quebecers. And then I grew up a bit in Toronto, but I moved to Vancouver when I was 11. So the majority of my young adult and adult life was in Vancouver, Canada. Beautiful, beautiful city. I don't know if you've been. Just
I
a
haven't.
couple
It's
hours
on my
north.
it's on my list. It's on my
It
list.
is so close to you. And it is so,
Yeah.
you have no idea. I mean, the most humbling trees, massive expanse of ocean, just mountains, beaches. You could see the mountains from the beaches. I mean, it's insane. Canadians are really friendly people. I don't know if you've heard that
I know.
before,
Oh no, I
but
know. So
you're
I
sure to
I
be
grew
friendly.
I grew up in Detroit, and Windsor borders Detroit.
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
so
Did you
growing up,
ever
we
go
used to
out?
go to Canada. Yes, we went to Windsor all the time, and
Hilarious.
people, yeah. So people told me that later on, they were like, Windsor is kind of like considered the hood in Canada. I was like, it is.
It's like, it's a, well, I mean, it's an interesting, it's not like Vancouver. East Coast Canada,
No,
West Coast Canada are I mean, it's the same like the States, right? You'd feel New York is very different from LA. And I kind of feel like that part of Canada is a bit more New York, you know, a bit more cosmopolitan, kind of fast moving, fast paced. Vancouver's a little bit more slow and chill. It's warmer, which that should already like perk your ears up, because I know Windsor's not warm. So,
it is not. And of course, I've been to Toronto, but getting
yeah.
back to what you just said is like Canadians are literally the nicest people ever. I heard the A when you said it earlier, and I was like,
Did I
oh,
say
I
that?
forgot. You said
That
A,
is
yes.
so embarrassing. I cannot believe I'm still saying. You know what? It's when I talk about Canada. It's your fault. You brought up Canada because I've tried to like erase that word from my
N-
vocabulary, and it's
No,
not
well, you
going.
shouldn't erase it, but actually, Sabrina, that was your second answer you gave me. You said A before I even asked you about Canada. It's because you said A that I reminded myself to ask you about Canada.
Oh my god, that is so funny. All right, well, I guess it's sticking with me. I don't know. I can't get rid of it. I'm just
No,
gonna
it's
stop trying.
totally fine. I love Canadians. To that end though, what was it like for you growing up in Canada? Because I believe your parents are Somalian. Is that correct?
Yep, my parents are
Mm.
Somali. I'm a first generation Canadian. My dad passed away when I was quite young, just before we moved to Vancouver. So my mom kind of had this big life change when my dad passed away, and she took us all West Coast. And the best way to describe it now, funny, and it might not be like that anymore, because I went back recently and felt a little different. But back then, it felt safe. It felt like a
Mm.
padded box that you couldn't hurt yourself. And I was very free spirited when I was young. Like, my mom was really conservative. I mean, not as conservative as some Somali parents can be, but she was quite conservative. I wasn't allowed sleepovers. I wasn't allowed. So I was like in a box, in a box. And I found ways to just like punch holes through it. So I would be like sneaking out, and oh my God. I was just thinking about this the other day, and I was trying to remind my mom. There was a point in time where I took one of her wigs and I put it in like on my pillow with pillows under the blanket. And I used to do that like every other night so I could sneak out, because I know she would check on me. And her heart just broke the day that she discovered that I was not that wig on that pillow. And oh my, and I just remember like, why did I used to do this? But it was this feeling of like, I felt safe enough to explore myself and be rebellious. And there, you know, I live in London now. There are times where I feel like I can't walk out with a nice handbag or a nice watch. Like, that's just the reality of living in central London, you know. And back then in Vancouver, we didn't lock our door. The fact that we didn't lock the door to our house, we had neighbors coming in and out. I could leave a bag in the car. It was safe. And that word is the first word that comes to my mind now because I miss that. I
Mm.
really miss
S-
that.
So, how, as a first generation Canadian, how did you navigate around the issues surrounding identity?
Yeah, I mean, so I was the only black girl in my high school, let alone African in my high school. And not to say that Canada isn't very diverse. And I mean, you've been to Toronto, you've been to Whistler. There's a massive African diaspora. There's a massive, Caribbean diaspora. But where I was in Burnaby, BC, at the high school that I was at, it was just me. And there was this kind of sense of wanting to. I never felt. Discriminated against directly. It was kind of through, jokes or, Canada is a lot more accepting of other cultures, but there was like a period where Save the Children ads were out in Somalia and Ethiopia were going through a famine and, children with very dire conditions. And that was kind of reflected on me, I felt, in a way to say Africans weren't either hardworking or waiting for a handout. And it was so different from what I knew of my family, who are all hardworking Canadians, immigrated just before the war, taxi drivers, engineers, a doctor. Like my family made up a group of people who I felt were actually a lot more of an accurate description of where I was coming from. So I was constantly kind of fighting that, like with my friends and trying to say, no, like that's not how Africans are. That's a crisis that's happening now, but don't paint the whole picture with that paintbrush because you see one thing on TV. So there was a little bit of trying to make a point of who I was or make a stand for my culture. Not to say that it was directly an opposing force that was against it, but just sort of this want to show it in a better light. And I carried that with me, and I realized that later in life, that same kind of wanting to give people a chance to show who they really are rather than being stigmatized or put in a bubble of aid and being in that sort of aid bubble. I wanted to show that actually Africa, the continent, is so diverse, it's massive, it's huge. There are people who are hardworking. There are people who work harder than anyone I know, and I still find myself trying to give a voice or give a soapbox to people who are in that position so that they can speak up for themselves.
Well, it's interesting because I remember those Save the Children ads as a kid, and I think the perception it left for us in the States is that Africa was all as a continent like completely underdeveloped, that there was no sense of technology, that is how everyone in Africa lived, not understanding it was just a very specific awful famine taking place in regions, and to
Mm.
conceptualize that Africa is a continent, not a country. Okay,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's a whole different, because there's
But
people
I
even
bet
now who
people
don't
still
understand that.
don't. I bet people still don't know that. There for
No,
sure
they
people
don't.
who still, yeah, right? Which is kind of
Mhm.
crazy with how big it is. Like how many times America could fit into Africa. You know what I mean? Like that's nuts to me because it's huge. I mean, and now I feel so thankful being able to discover intimately another side of the continent. Like literally the polar opposite. Me and Idris are like east and west. Like he's on one coast, I'm on the other. And to be able to kind of find, similarities, but see the massive differences. And I find that so beautiful. Like, and if you haven't been to the continent, I don't know if you have, whoever's listening, if you haven't been, there are so many beautiful places to go. The most beautiful trips I've ever been on.
Yeah, I have been. I've been fortunate enough to go. We spent part of our honeymoon, me and my husband, in Kenya. I've been to Ghana,
Oh
been to South
my God.
Africa. Yeah.
We honeymooned East Coast as well. We did Tanzania. So that's so funny that you did that. Great minds.
Yes.
Like, yep, I love
And
it.
it was beautiful, and especially I remember we went to Ghana. This was after our honeymoon. We were able to go there during, it wasn't the height of the pandemic, but it was in 2021, I believe it was. And it was one I couldn't help but note, and I love this, and this is the case in Africa, period. Um, well, maybe not all of Africa. It certainly wasn't the case in South Africa, but in Ghana, one, it's like I could eat my way through that entire country. It's like the food is amazing.
Mm,
Two, I didn't know Ghana partied like that. I was
flavors.
like, I gotta have a different gear for
Yeah.
Ghana. Didn't know they party like that.
Right.
And
Was it the
three,
year of the
it's
was it the year of the return?
No, it was after that. See, when all the black people left the States and didn't take me with them, I was mad. And so no, it was actually a year or so after that because a friend of ours, he was celebrating his 10th wedding anniversary and they wanted to take a group to Ghana. Nobody had been, and so we went there. And it's probably one of the few vacations, or if maybe the only vacation where I went and I didn't see nobody white for a whole 9 days. I
Right,
was like,
right, right. That's so
I
funny.
was
I felt the same way, by the way. Ghana can party. We went the year of the return. That was my first time. And
Oh
that
wow.
was, I mean, it was insane. And we like easily up till like 6 a.m. Just, we went to this all white party that was like one of the craziest parties still to this day I've ever seen. It must have been like 5,000 people. It's insane. Like, and just
Yeah.
one DJ. I'm like, this DJ must be like he's on top of the world right now. Like, the biggest party. It's
Yeah,
insane.
friends of mine who went on that trip, they said the same thing that they were so many nights they were up to sunrise, and I was like, "Oof, I don't know if I had that gear in me, but I'm sure I would have been juvenated by the party, and I would have the adrenaline would have kicked in, so I think I would have been I
100%.
would have been fine.
And
So
the
it's
food
all
is
good.
amazing, but like try cooking it. Because
Oh
my husband
heck
still has
no.
a heavy West African appetite, and I'm like just learning okra soup and a goosey, and I'm still making fufu from the powder because this is hard. It's an arm workout. It's patience. You're in the kitchen all day, like, but the food is amazing and the spice. And now I can handle like I actually make it a point to try whatever hottest hot sauce there is because I'm like I think I'm a champ now. I'm like I have literally Idris's mom will burn your mouth off. Like she does not care. She was like, eat it. She'll watch you. She's like, do you like it? I love it. It's so good. I'm like crying. It's delicious. Because Somalis, we have hot sauce on the side. In Sierra Leone, Ghana, it's cooked in. There's no getting
Yes,
away from
yes,
it.
it's baked in. No,
It's baked
definitely.
in.
So have you been able to duplicate any of your mother-in-law's recipes?
I that is a benchmark and a goal that I will never achieve. It's up there in the clouds, but it's tolerable and he likes it and he'll eat it. And to me, mission accomplished.
Well, since you brought him up, because I find your origin story as a couple to be so fascinating. It's obviously a phrase we've all heard, love at first sight, but from what I read, it really was love at first sight. So, explain what happened this night you all meet in, what was it, Slow Jam Sunday or something?
Oh my
Or
gosh.
Slow Jam
Okay, you
night?
you open this Pandora's box. I am corny and so cheesy when it comes to this story because to me it was just like really. And you know what? This is so funny because I had just gotten out of a really bad relationship, so I was not this person. I was like, men are trash. They suck. I'm like literally ready to just switch it on up or something because I was so over it. And I mean, I hope my ex isn't listening, but it was awful. Anyways, so I had I'd come to this party with like a night off of work that I'd pre-booked because I was working literally every weekend, but it was my girlfriend's birthday party. So I was there kind of by chance. Like Slow Down Sundays is an amazing night in Vancouver. It's the one night I would probably go to, but you wouldn't see me out often because I was a weekend worker. I was working at restaurants and service industry. It's like your weekends are taken up. And Idris was filming this film in Vancouver and had one night off in Vancouver because most of it was filmed sort of up north in the mountains. And his stunt double, or like, yeah, I guess it would be his stunt double, convinced him to go to Slow Jam Sunday. So by chance, we were both there. My girlfriend actually was brave enough to like kind of go up to this only black guy in Vancouver. And she's like, who is this guy? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, I'm going to go hit on him. And I was like, you go do it. All right. And she was like pretty, gone. Claire, poor Claire. Anyway, so they're talking for a little while, and like, yeah, I thought he was cute. And then she comes over and she's like, "Oh, I think he's talking about you." And I'm like, "Really? Oh, really? That's awful. Why would he do that? He was talking to you." And I'm trying to be like a good friend, but then I was kind of like, "Oh, but he's really cute." She's like, "Okay, well, go over to him. So I go over and we have like one of those conversations that you just feel like you've known this person for 10 years because we're singing the same songs. Like when a song comes on that I love, he's like, I love this song. I'm like, what? Like I just had this like cultural connection. He's African. I'm like, where are you from? Like, and then when I went outside, I realized because there's a group of people there, they're like, oh, you're talking to Idris Elba. And I was like,
So
oh.
at this stage, like, how known was he?
Well, so the film that I had seen was Obsessed. It's so funny
The
to say
Beyonce
that.
movie, right?
So it
The
was
one we.
like kind of, I mean, it was kind of right. If I feel Idris Elba now, like he gets recognized so much in that moment, unless you were kind of in that zeitgeist. And he was definitely a lot more popular in America. I don't think I would have known it. Even when they said it was him, I was trying to remember, like, oh, where is he? My friends were like, yeah, he's an Obsessed. And we're like, oh, yeah. Anyway, so I immediately went, he's not going to talk to me. That was like cute and fun, but he's obviously an actor here for like a night because Vancouver has a lot of that. There's a lot of actors coming in for short-term projects in and out of the city, and you know what that means. And I thought, okay. Anyway, so I went back inside. We started chatting some more. He was like, let me take your number. I was like, all right. And then I left. And I left with the whole group of girls, and we went to another venue because the birthday girl wanted to keep it going and listen to something a bit more lively than just slow jams. So we go to this other random venue, and as I'm about to leave, because I was like kind of in this, I don't really care. I don't want to be out. I just got over a breakup. I'm just going to go home. So as soon as they were like kind of drunk enough to not notice I was leaving, I was like out of there. And I'm about to go into a taxi. I'm literally holding the door handle of the taxi and the phone rings. And I pick it up because it's like +44, something like, I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, oh, it must be him. It must be Idris. And I pick up. He's like, don't get in the taxi. Don't get in the taxi. I'm like, what? Where are you? I'm like, this is so creepy. He's like parked up just a couple cars down. And he pulled up right as I was leaving. And he must have saw me and went, oh my gosh, he's leaving. And then he called and he's like, get in my car. So I got in his car and we spoke till like 8 a.m. easy. And it was probably like 2 at that time. We just had the most intense, amazing conversation. And it was the first time I ever connected with someone to the point where I was like, I went home the next day, called my friends. I was like, I think I found my soulmate. And so when we say love at first sight, like I literally was like, he's perfect. And then we were inseparable for 30 days, I think. And then he had to go and then he came back and then he was there for another 2 months. And then it was like, okay, well, I've got to go home. So we did long distance for, I want to say it was close to 3 months. I went to visit once and then it was like, this is hard. Long distance is hard. Respect to everyone doing long distance. And we were like, okay, one of us has to move. I guess it's not you. Let me try this out. And everyone thought I was kind of crazy. And I thought I was kind of crazy because, I was always that person that was very sort of charted my course based on me. Like I was quite selfish in that way. Like I'm going to move here. I'm going to do this. So for me to be moving for somebody else because I really believed in this relationship, I think it was a little bit out of character. But I'm so happy I did it. And now, 7 years later, 4 years married, I feel I've genuinely found my soulmate.
So I think we both got married the same year, and because you were married in 2019, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. What
Okay,
what
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 month?
month? Wait. Our
Yeah.
anniversary is April 26th, so we're literally right
Okay.
around the corner. What was yours?
Okay. All right. November 10th.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
We're a little
Yes.
ahead of
So
you. I could give you some
yes, you
marriage
are.
advice if you like.
I did. I know you got me. I know you got
I
me.
got a couple months.
Well, listen, I know I don't know if you felt this way, but every time, like when we first got married, and it's still kind of this way now, we always when we talk to other couples, we'll be like, yeah, we've been married 4 years, and they'll be like, yeah, we've been married 15. I'm like, dang,
Oh,
we never can beat anybody.
oh my gosh. That feeling is like constant, isn't it? It's like you only meet other relationships who've been like 3 times. I remember we sat down with like Will Smith randomly forever ago, right? And he was like, how long you been together? And we were like, oh, it was like a year, I think now. And he's like, it's nothing. Nothing. That is a drop in the bucket. You will change again, change 4 more times after that. I remember thinking, oh my God, he's probably right. And even in like, and you could probably attest to this, 4 years of marriage, I know you've probably been together longer than that, but you do change. You watch this person kind of go from one side of their character to the other side and then flip it around and then come back around and I'm like, okay, so how many more times will that person change and how many more times will I adapt, forgive, um, concede, or do whatever, to kind of make it work, because it is work, it is effort, and it takes constant kind of maintenance to make it work. And I understand that now. And so thinking of it in this 4-year period for us, there is no divorce. It's for the long run. So trying to think of that over like 30 years, I'm like, oh my God, that's a lot. But
Well,
in a good way.
I asked Idris this question when he did the podcast, and I'll ask you the same. So how I think of marriage as not necessarily a reflection; it's a mirror. So, what
Mm,
has this marriage shown you about yourself?
mm, that I need more patience. Definitely. But also some like kind of not so nice things. And if I'm really honest, it's shown me that I need more confidence. And I think for me, there was always a little bit of, "Oh, I'm married to like the most amazing human on the planet. Who am I?" And Idris was very quick to point out, you can't think like that. Like, what are you talking about? I'm a person, you're a person, we love each other. And I still have moments where I feel like, and it sounds so silly to say, but it's just the truth of, I love him so much. I find that I'm like trying to chase and figure out who I am, and he's at a point in his life where he's very accomplished, and he has a journey that he can turn around and look back on and feel proud of, and I don't know if I'm quite there yet, so I feel a little behind in life, and a little bit of it is to do with the age gap, but a little bit of it is also to do with the fact that he is one of the most motivated, creative people, will work all day and never sleep kind of people. And I had to tell myself, don't compare your work ethic. Don't We're two different people, like, and building that side of my confidence to think I can adapt in this world and be motivated for myself in this world in a way that feels genuine, and have aspirations and have dreams that feel attainable, because he'll literally wake up and go, I think I'm going to fly today. Like, where do you get that confidence? And he'll do it, and I find myself still trying to make up for that. So that mirror has shown me that I have a lot of work to do, or self work to do, in that space to figure out who I am in this world when it comes to leaving a mark. And not that to say that everybody has to leave a mark, but I think we all want to leave the world better than we came into it. And we all kind of have like this desire to inflict or create some type of change. And I find myself chasing that now, which is a blessing, but sometimes can also feel like a hamster wheel.
Mm. Well, I think a lot of people would appreciate your candor because certainly in my own marriage, like I didn't realize how defensive I was until that's what the mirror showed me. I was like, oh my God, I can be really defensive.
Mm,
And that, I also am much more sensitive than I thought. And maybe it's just because I'm striving to be, because vulnerability was always very difficult for me in all the previous relationships that I had. And so in this one, my husband sort of forced me to be more vulnerable, not be indirectly. He didn't know he was doing it, but he
mm,
was, because of his level of honesty and candor and vulnerability. Like he forced me into that same space, and it just every time I'm in that space, I feel like I'm flailing. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do that I'm here, And I always joke with him all the time. I was like, why am I always the one crying in this relationship? Not that I expect him to be, and not that he's made me necessarily cry, but sometimes we've had like emotional conversations, tough
relatable.
conversations. Exactly. It's like, and then I'm the one, and that is not me. Like most of my friends who know me would say, we have never even come close to seeing her cry. And I was like, and yet all the time I'm like this in this
My
marriage.
God, I can relate to that so much. I'm also not that person. I'm second oldest of my siblings. I have three under me. I felt like I was like kind of mom early on because my older sister sort of was doing her own thing. And my friends will say, oh, we never see her cry. But when I get emotional with Idris, I am a wreck. I feel like you. I'm the same way. I'm like, I can't even get my point across because there's so much, I guess, that this is what I'm, and this is going to sound like therapy speech, but it's not. But I think what I've discovered about that, and not to take your story, but you're just reminding me of this, is that I don't ask anyone else for anything. And I don't know if you can relate to this. I
I
don't
can.
ask anyone else for anything. So when I go to Idris, I have this cup that is slightly depleted. Okay.
Mm.
And it's like I have given everything else because I don't want to ask for anything else. I'm not asking anyone else to fill my cup. So I go to him with an empty cup of like, fill it for me. I need everything. I need your 100% emotional output. And then I'm going to pour it all on you because I don't do it to anyone else. So I don't know if you could relate to that side of that
I
in
can.
regards to the
Yeah.
story. Yeah. And I don't know why sometimes maybe we grow up as Black women having to have this kind of tough exterior, and have to, and women in general actually have to just, get to it. Just do it so that when we have this moment of vulnerability, we realize, oh my God, I have nothing left to give. I'm just empty.
Yeah, I feel like we just stumbled into an episode of coupledom,
Oh,
right quick,
yes.
but without our
I'm
spouses.
sorry.
No, that's a good thing. Like I mean, I love the podcast, and I do want to talk to you
Oh, I'm
more
so
about
happy.
that. I do. I love it. You guys have great conversations, and like Tommy and Cody are two friends of mine. So,
Get
and
out.
yes, and so
We
the one
wanted
you
to
did with
do an
them was great.
episode. Oh, I wanted to do an episode for them, and then timing just couldn't work out. And I think they don't do the show anymore. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's yep, that is true. Yeah.
Which is so sad because it was such a beautiful and important show, I think. I've got to reach out to them because I love them. That was such a great episode. But coming from you, like the Jemele Hill, to say that you
Oh,
like our podcast,
yeah, your
okay,
podcast
I
great.
feel so validated right now. I'm about to go start 10 other podcasts. I'm ready.
Okay, you making me blush. Now you're making me blush. All right. What I love about the series that, of course, people assume that you just mean romantic couples, and there were certainly that. But the fact that you included business partners in that relationship, like work relationships, I love that you guys define couples in like a broad way because it really was quite introspective, very good. And I just thought you guys together, like as hosts, had like such an easy dynamic. So what was it like creating that project and working together?
Oh man, it was so fun. And the project actually came out of sort of this frustration at the beginning of COVID when we kind of, well, we both had COVID and we were like on CNN with COVID.
Yeah, I'll say because you guys had the OG COVID. Like you had the first
We had COVID round one.
you had the COVID round one and y'all yeah, it was
When
fast.
it
I
was
was like, oh my
scary.
God. When it was really scary, yes.
It was actually really scary, and we went through this kind of wellness. So first, first generation Africans, we have all our African family members calling, being like, boil milk and put ginger in it and honey and do this, and I don't know how you got this thing. You must, like my mom was telling me my immune system must be shot. Like, how did you get COVID? I knew that your immune system was weak. You're always flying around. I'm like, oh my gosh, it is, I guess. And just questioning like my health. And we went on this kind of wellness journey, and whatever that means, like YouTube videos of yoga, like trying to eat like yogurt and I don't know, smoothie, like sea moss. But actually, we found what was missing the most from that journey and that discovery was that no one was talking about what was actually affecting us the most at that time, which was the lack of relationships because we were so
Mhm.
separated and so isolated from everyone that we loved. I miss my mom. I miss my friends. I miss my work, like coworkers. I miss everything. And no one was talking about it. And we thought, what an important conversation that's not being had. So let's have this conversation. And it started with Together Tuesdays on Instagram. Like, how silly. But actually, it was so much fun. Like, we had great episodes every Tuesday on Instagram Live when Instagram Live was really popping. I don't know if you remember during
Oh
lockdown,
yeah.
it was like
Oh yeah. The
all
Instagram
time
live
high,
was the only interaction a lot of us had with
right?
community, with each other. Yeah.
Can't even go on a live now. I like hate it when someone wants to do a live. I'm like, ah. We started this just trying to understand how relationships work and what the steps are to just not only maintain them, but to help them grow and to nurture them into something much bigger. And we thought, let's talk to duos we admire. So coupledom as a word, you're right, generally speaks to a romantic couple. But for us, it was like any two people making it in this world together. So whether it was familial or business or best friends, partnerships, romantic as well, like you said, just what makes you work. And some of the episodes, for us were just so, so nurturing and important because we were coming into it as newlyweds. and we genuinely wanted to like tell us what to do. How do you make this work? And we were working together, and people always said, don't work with your partner. And we wanted to kind of disprove that, because there were so many great duos and couples working with either their best friends or their siblings or their partners or their moms, or and really making it work. Because I think if you have a shared goal and a shared dream or shared passion, that you can get through life together easier. It's one of the first things we learn in school, like the buddy system. Hold someone's hand when you go to the bathroom, right? We're better in twos, we are stronger in twos. And we kind of forget that somewhere along the way, where we get isolated and we focus on social interactions through our phones rather than face to face. And we wanted to kind of reignite that, and it felt like the appropriate time. But the most interesting thing that we learned, and that was a continuous thread through all the episodes, was you have to have a strong relationship with self before you can have a strong relationship with anyone else. And you'll find that kind of thread through all the episodes, which actually is the reason we started our wellness brand, Sable Labs, because we thought, well, what does selfless self-care, community-focused self-care look like for us? And it was just this perfect storm of like COVID, couldn't get any products. Idris was using all my stuff. He had time to like mock my 9-step skincare routine. And I was like, what are you talking about, Mr. Vaseline? And it was just this discovery time for us. And also looking at, like things that we felt were kind of somewhat appropriated as first generation Africans, like Baobab trendy shots at Whole Foods and things that we've been having since we were kids, and be like, okay, how do we combine all these things we've learned with that idea of relationship with self and create something? And it turned out to be skincare at Sable Labs, which was probably the most freeing thing I've ever done, is to create something out of a genuine, spontaneous passion. I'm called spontaneous passion because like we were having conversations with couples, but ended up being like, oh, great. Well, let's create skincare. And we just felt that journey, just for us, it was just like one thing after the other made so much sense. Like not only the philanthropic work we were doing, finding out how ingredients are sourced for skincare, we also had the time on our hands to look at formulations and realize that most formulations are actually not melanin inclusive. Like they don't contain any ingredients that help prevent things like hyperpigmentation. You're either spending so much money to get, brands that I was using and love because they've got a niche line for issues that melanated skin faces, or you're going, let's be honest, Walmart, CVS, Target, that black aisle trying to get some shea, and you
Yep.
don't know where it's sourced, and or what fragrances and synthetics and alcohols and everything that's in it, that kind of, you get what you pay for, right? So we wanted to create something that was in between, that kind of was maximum efficiency on your skin, minimum impact on the planet. So I didn't have to use 9 things. So Idris could just understand 3 things and have this core connection between the both of us. And I feel like I love the podcast for so many things, but I love it for helping us through that journey in our lives and that point of discovery to come to where we have with Sable Labs. And I feel so proud about where we are with the company now.
Well, before I ask you more about Sable Labs, which is just for people listening, Sable is just the Elbas backwards.
I know. So
I was like, oh, that's so brilliant. I was like,
and we kept the apostrophe in it. So it'd be like, Elba.
Yes, you kept the apostrophe.
So
Correct.
people think it's like Sabla or like Sablé. I'm like, oh, darn.
Give it that French twist to it, But before I ask you more about the company that you all created, just a question about coupledom. So you guys did 6 episodes. Are there any plans for any more?
We did 12, actually, I think.
Oh, you did 12. I only went through the first 6, huh? Only 6 was on my Audible.
Seasons, and we've been a little bit busy, but there is definitely more planned.
More coming. Okay.
So many conversations we want to pick up. We have a couple episodes that we haven't released. So there's a lot more to come. I think you know how that is.
Yes, I do. Yeah. No, I just wanted to make sure. I was like, this is still going, right? Like we still need some more coupledom.
We definitely don't want it to end. And I feel actually now, I mean, every season I felt like that. Like at the beginning of the first, I was like, who am I to even ask these questions? Second one, I was like, I have so many more questions. Now I have like a kind of sense of understanding around what I want to ask and why we started it, enough to be confident enough to say, no, these are the questions I'm going to ask. So I feel like this next season will be so much better even. And that's not just to sell it.
I know it. I For everybody listening, it's on Audible. It's really really great, and especially if you're in any kind of relationship, business, romantic, like it's a very good podcast to listen to. So I highly recommend. But let's talk about Sabo Labs. It's the company, as you mentioned, genderless skincare that you
Yeah.
and Idris started together. Um, it's something important that you said about how I think there is this negative perception about when you work with your husband or with a friend.
Mm.
And like the majority of people that I work with are people who are friends of mine. My chief of staff is my
Mhm.
best friend from high school. So it's like we, people always see the downside of that, but I think there's a tremendous upside because these are people who have been in your life that you trust. And I only see the upside of working with people. I know there can be a rocky, there can be sometimes there can be some sticky situations that's going to happen, but that would happen with somebody who didn't know you for a long time as well.
Exactly.
So, right. So this is my long-winded way of asking, what are some of the boundaries as you all are in the deep in the throes of this company of Sable Labs? What are some of the boundaries you all have had to set between your working relationship and your personal relationship?
I mean, I'm happy you asked that question because I think boundaries is the most important part of that whole conversation. If you can work with, a friend, a loved one, a family member, as long as you set those boundaries. So for us, it was very simple things like not bringing the work home to dinner, not sitting at the dinner table and be like, can you just look at this one email that we need you to respond to that, I mean, it just is so busy. It would be a lot of that. Like, babe, I need you to just sign off on one thing and I had to learn to not bring that home because it just became disruptive and would cause one to sort of bleed into the other, and we had to treat them like very separate things, and I had to put my ego aside and be like, okay, I need a meeting with him, I'm going to go through his assistant and schedule it in, and because that's a work relationship when it's at that point, right? And when it's a date, I'm going to call him and ask him for that on my own because that's our love relationship. So I had to learn to the ways of working for both because he is a busy person, and I expect the same in return for him to, if he wants a meetings, for him to go about the way that he would want me to go about it with him. So those types of boundaries we had to set up very quickly because it was definitely going to be a lot of like, and there's an ease to it, right? When you can get something done a lot quicker when you have access to that person a lot more. But we have to understand with anyone that just because you want to work at a certain hour doesn't mean that they want to work at a certain hour. And I'm definitely like a midnight on emails type person, whereas he's like a 4 a.m. person. And I'm like, no, like it was midnight. You missed the gun. Like, sorry. So creating those kind of boundaries, but also when we have a failure in work, to not take that as a failure in our relationship and to be able to separate those two things. And when we have a win at work, to be able to not take that as a win in our relationship, because then the relationship just becomes about work wins. And I didn't realize that until we, are sitting and cheersing about just work things, or that's taking up the majority of our conversation. I'm like, wait, we forgot about the wins that we should be building in our relationship outside of work. So like it goes both ways. I think boundaries for me was the most important thing.
So how do you handle it? How do you all handle business disagreements? Like you see something one way, he sees it another way. How do you resolve those issues?
A greater team. because because we will come to a mute point sometimes, and and it can be like that in any workplace. Like some people just don't see, so we will there has to be compromise, of course, and there has to be compassion for the other person's um, version or agreement or argument. But I also think you need, and it helps when you have a couple more people feeding in and be like, actually, maybe this is unbiased people being, maybe this is the right way to go. Maybe that's the right way to go. And then we can go, okay, I'll accept defeat. The greater team thinks that this is great for the company. Happy to do that. But when it is just me and him, sometimes it can get contentious, of course, and it's not easy at those points when you're working with someone that you love because you just want to go, babe, just let me win this one. Like you don't know what you're talking about. And you have to remember, oh, hold on. This is a professional work relationship. I wouldn't talk to someone at work like that. So that can be kind of hard.
Now, you both have been especially passionate about a number of humanitarian issues.
Mm.
especially when it comes to improving the lives of people in rural communities. You all work very closely with the United Nations International Fund for Agricultural Development. You've been to Sierra Leone and visited there, and you do just a lot of work around the globe. Why was it important to you to make this component of international social justice a part of your very powerful platform?
You know, I didn't know that it was initially. I think I always had sort of a philanthropic kind of side to me because my mom was very philanthropic in that sense. She's always been someone who would stand up for someone else, and regardless of any situation, it could be very small, but it could also be very big. Like she would fight for the story around or the stigma around Africans to change as long as I could remember, you know, and that was something that obviously bled into me, like we spoke about earlier. But I think just growing up in that kind of household, when I had the opportunity and privilege to be able to find myself on a trip with a UN agency that I feel is one of the world's best kept secrets, like EFAD is not spoken about enough because it's quite different from, you know, organizations like WFP or UNICEF who work on an aid model, which is very important. There's a time and place for aid. You know, when there's a crisis happening, when there's a famine happening, you need aid organizations to go in. But the way EFAD structures itself is that it gives people a chance to build a livelihood of their own by teaching them a basic skill, and that skill is agriculture. And when you can live off the land that you literally live on, that changes the whole narrative, and you become independent in that way. You're not waiting for aid, or you become or you get into a position where you feel you can build resilience towards a crisis because the crises won't stop, particularly with the way the climate change is going and how quickly people in rural areas need to adapt. So I felt so privileged to be on this trip. We're in Sierra Leone, like you mentioned. You know, we went with Global Citizen, who I don't know if you know,
Hmm.
amazing organization that encourages young people to use their voice. And if they don't even have anything in their pockets, you know, you could still sign up, write a letter, speak out, and you get rewarded for it by going to a concert or something. So this amazing organization on one hand that helps build youth advocacy, and then the UN just educating me on what rural people are going through. And I was like, wow, because I thought I was going into this kind of, you know, UN typical sort of aid model. They don't even accept private donations. It is literally about changing the way governments spend when it comes to investment in rural areas, when it comes to, you know, whatever budget they might have built that year, if they're carving it out for aid and not adaptation, what are the long-term solutions that we're looking at? You know, aid in one sense can be very short-sighted, and when you engage governments in this way, you build a more sustainable model that isn't dependent on private donations and things like that. So for us it was like, wow, I had no idea this existed. And then that one trip spawned this whole mission of like, okay, I want to do everything I can to kind of help people understand what EFAD does, who they are, and, you know, and help speak for with the rural people who don't have a voice. But we're so thankful for the programs that were on the ground when we got there. It's funny because Sierra Leone had gone through an Ebola pandemic, which no one really cared or supported, or in the same way that we kind of rallied around the global crisis that was the COVID pandemic, unfortunately. So places in West Africa were kind of left on their own. But organizations like EFAD built systems up that when the informal markets closed, for example, and women who make up the majority of rural communities had nowhere to go and sell the stuff that they had just grown, they had people who could come in and give loans and help them build more climate resilient seeds and find routes around closures, and, you know, and build structures and put structures in place that could help them get through it. And hearing that on the ground, I was like, wow, okay, EFAT stays the course. And I know this kind of sounds like and probably an advertisement for like the UN, but this is my genuine experience with this agency, and I just thought that has changed and shifted my whole way of thinking about how we should look at development funding and how we should engage governments around development funding for rural people, because we actually need them. They're the ones who grow a third of the world's food. They're the ones who help protect biodiversity in their regions. It's so much different from big agro. Small agro actually is part of the fight against climate change. I mean, if we stopped all greenhouse gas emissions today, okay, and we went completely green, you would still need nature-based solution. You would still need people to replant trees and to protect regions and biodiversity and mangroves and rebuild the structures that we've destroyed. So you can't have the goals that we have in Paris without including rural people. But like 1% of climate financing goes to adaptation to protect rural people. I mean, it's a joke. It's an actual
Mm.
joke. And no one is talking about it because it's rural people who don't have a voice. So it was like, great. This is something that I really want to get into. And I'm thankful that now we're UN Goodwill Ambassadors for that agency and get to talk about it on every podium and every conference. And I'll keep talking about it. And I think, what IFAD is doing is really great.
Well, you said you hinted on something or said something that was really important. Uh, a while ago, I had Rashad Robinson, who's the founder of Color of Change, on the podcast, and he said something that stayed with me. And he said, "Charity cannot fix inequality and structural," or he said, "Charity cannot fix structural inequality," and he's
Mm,
right. And so, you telling me that they don't even accept private donations is big because the private donations help in the short term. They help,
mhm.
but they don't change structure. You have to change the DNA of a structure in order for it to be sustainable for generations of people. And even in the understanding of the social justice fight in America, I often remind people of that, is that that's great that this person can build a school here, or this person can develop this here based off private donations, but it's not going to last unless the government is changed, that it has to be broken and put back together and reshaped so that
Absolutely.
so that the equality actually lasts. So it's amazing to hear that you're a part of an organization that understands that fundamentally. Yeah, I know you didn't get into this kind of work for recognition, but nevertheless, you both received the Time 100 Impact Award. It's a very big award, a very big deal. So how did you feel receiving that award?
I mean, I still can't believe I received anything from Time. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God. Like, I never would. The working in the field is so, you're in a moment, and it's really hard to take a bird's eye view of what's happening, because it always feels like it's in crisis mode and still feels very much in that regard. There's so much work to be done. So to receive an award, you feel like I just started this journey, and it did kind of allow us to sit back and go, okay, we've made some big strides, and we're thankful for that. But I think really what it did for us is just give us that extra bit of motivation to tackle that next hurdle, or the hurdle after that, because it's just, I mean, we've opened a Pandora's box for ourselves with what we can do and what people can do when it comes to advocacy, and how important it is to be able to use any platform that you have. Because even if you can speak to one person, and I say this all the time, you have a platform to encourage change and to encourage thought and conversation. And that's really what we should all be doing, is questioning why things are the way they are, because it's a shame to me that people get so forgotten on this climate conversation. People, like literal people, who are fighting every day against weather changes that are happening now, because for us climate change feels like a future conversation, or we're going to hit that 1.5 degrees, like who knows however long from now, 10 years or whatever. But there are people who wake up every morning not knowing if it's going to rain, if they can grow a crop. They haven't had rain seasons. Like, it's literally happening now in the global south and in rural areas. So for us, it's just about having the motivation to remember that, okay, it's crisis, 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 but there are changes being made. And I do feel now a little bit more hopeful from the commitments that we've seen. I mean, I'm still having bilaterals with governments who don't know what EFAD is, and I'm like, excuse me? Like, how many times are we going to have this introductory conversation? Because if you are a climate ambassador for our country and you don't know what EFAD is, there's a problem there. And that's to show why climate financing and climate funding is so poorly distributed, and isn't distributed in a way that has a long-term kind of thinking. So for us, I'm happy to build and keep talking and keep lecturing government on, you guys need to do better, because government do need to do better, and it's not about necessarily committing more, it's about committing smarter.
Mm, uh, that's a word right there. Um, so with you all working together so often, from your philanthropy to the podcast to Sable, I'm wondering if being able to work together in that fashion, obviously we see sometimes there are celebrity couples where, one person is maybe the actor or the entertainer and the other person is in a totally different business, not necessarily that puts them in the limelight. I'm
Mm.
wondering, does the fact that you guys work together as often and as much as you do, does that help? Does that better help you navigate his celebrity?
Interesting. I don't know if I navigate it now. Like, but the fact that you think I do
Well, I mean,
makes
I
no
just wondered. I was
sense.
like, oh, well, they work together so often, so
Yeah.
you don't feel like, because I know it cannot be at times, for at least other people I've talked to, it is at times not easy to have to share your spouse or your partner with the world all the time, right? But
Yeah.
at least
Yeah.
some of you guys have combined your world, so I'm wondering if that helps that part of
It
it.
does help. It does help. And I'm just joking because I do think there are times where I'm like, "Oh my God, he is so famous." Still. I actually forget that when we're just like eating Cheetos on the couch watching Netflix, and then we go outside, and it's like I'm kind of scared. We should probably go back inside. Like, it's a lot of aunties coming up to you.
Not the aunties.
The aunties don't play.
Oh
Okay,
my gosh.
aunties will
Oh Lord.
push me out of the way. I'm like, all right, all right. But like, I do feel having an understanding of that world in from his side has helped me feel a bit more. And for example, if you kind of just came into it, and you spend the day with Idris, and you see someone getting constant love and validation, it's hard for you to kind of think of this person as someone who still has daily struggles and has confidence that issues that he might have to get through, or whatever it is, because he just gets yes, 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 I love you, love you, love you, okay, okay, okay. But then to go home with him, you would have a hard time kind of understanding, whoa, how does that not flood your system and make you this huge-headed guy? But actually, he has a really amazing way of separating that from his real life, and I wouldn't have known that that is a very separate thing until I started maybe to feel some of that, or my team were being validating in that same way, when sometimes I would question, well, are we saying yes because you think you're trying to make me happy, or are we saying yes because you agree? And start to experience some of those things. I was like, okay, I get that. It's very easy to see through it. And when
Mm.
you're on the outside, you kind of it looks very, and we look at people in celebrity like they're very privileged, or like, what do they have to complain about or mope about? Like, they have this perfect life, or but you realize actually that can be very destructive. And I don't know if that's necessarily the answer you're looking for, but I don't think I would have known that unless I found myself in positions where I felt people were trying to people please me, either to get to him or to find something from me. And now I have a better understanding of that.
Yeah, well, and you also, you're navigating, a global celebrity, but it's the type of celebrity too. I mean, Idris is obviously a great actor, but
Mm.
because he also is like number one in on every woman's list of people that they all love, then you're dealing with the whole sex symbol part of him being
Oh
a
yeah.
celebrity. So how do you navigate that part of it?
You know what? That's another thing you start to see through. Like, I think, like, for instance, when women would literally come in and interrupt our hug to be like, Idris, Idris, like, and I don't even exist, and I'd be like, oh my god. And then the funniest part was, like, they'd ask me to take the picture. Always.
Wait, they ask you to. Okay, so let
Oh,
me tell you one
90%
boundary
of the time.
one boundary that I set is that I tell people who want to take pictures with me, my husband is not my photographer. So we can take the
Right.
picture. He's never taking the photo.
See, I'm so Canadian. I was like,
That
yeah, of course, I'll take it for you. Like,
you too nice,
yeah.
Sabrina. You gotta cut that off. You
But
gotta
it
cut
made me
that off.
realize in that moment, they can't even like change their phone camera. They don't remember their code. They
Yeah,
like
they're like they checked out.
they are checked out, and it reminds you like, oh, it's not even real. There's no real connection happening between these two people. It's just like a kind of, and it just would say that, and I'd be like, no, like, she like really likes you, or da da da, and he'd be like, she didn't even know what her name was in that moment. She's just literally celebrity struck. And I had a hard time understanding what that was, but that's a real thing. Like, people just black out. Like, you know,
Just
there's no bad intentions there. They just blacked out. Like, they didn't mean to push me aside or like ask me for the picture. And I started to realize that. And that's maybe like a glass half full way of thinking of it. But
well,
now I give
you
people the benefit of the
see,
doubt.
that's the Canadian you, and I appreciate it. I do.